Good evening, everybody. My name is Scott Jacobs, and you're listening to Juiced Sports Radio, covering the snoozefest. That was the 2012 BCS National Championship game between SEC powers Alabama and LSU. While one power showed up, the other couldn't be bothered, because Honey Badger don't care. Jeez, did Brent Musburger say that enough during the game? Mike, what the heck happened to LSU?
It just didn't seem like their offense had a plan. They never adjusted. They were kind of like the Falcons in the playoff game the other day against the Giants. They really just didn't have a plan. Once they had a plan, but once their plan didn't work, they didn't have a backup plan, and it just seemed like Alabama came ready to play. They definitely watched the tape from the midseason game, and they studied. They had the more elite names on defense. It seemed like LSU's defense kind of wavered throughout the game. Yeah, they didn't give up a touchdown till late, but they were able to keep them out of the end zone for pretty much the most of the game. But their major players, Matthew and Claiborne, really did nothing.
Right. And, before we even get into the game, I want to ask you a question that has been sort of hinged on my mind for the last half of this game, or whatever you want to call it. The idea of who is number two. And I know the immediate answer would usually be LSU. They have to be. People were ready to vote them national champions even if they lost this game in close fashion. Obviously, if you lose 21-0, becoming the first team in the BCS era to get shut out in a BCS bowl, never mind the BCS Championship game, you have no right to make that claim, no matter how good your regular season is. That said, LSU was so bad in this game, and if we take the parameters of what have you done for me lately, which is what college football usually does, towards the end of their season, you could make the argument, and I think a very good case in this case, that once again, Oklahoma State should be number two. Mike, any chance LSU falls below Oklahoma State in the final rankings?
I think that's a valid point considering how many points were scored in that Oklahoma State-Stanford game. I honestly think it should be a split championship between Alabama and Oklahoma State. I think they definitely needed that +1, affair where, they were talking about the four teams. I honestly think Oklahoma State could have beaten Alabama today. I know Alabama played really, really well. All their big defensive stars really stepped up, but, we'll never know.
We won't, and that's what I think everyone can stand about the BCS. Some people have qualms about the NFL that, maybe the best teams don't always play each other, but they play it out on the field, and the team that scores the most points gets to advance each week. And there's nobody who gets left at the altar going, I didn't have my shot. And you know what? I think that's what everybody hates about the BCS. I really hope this drives people to want a +1 even more than they already do. This had to be one of the most unwatchable championship games in any sport that I can recall in recent memory. Field goal after field goal after field goal. And, the unbelievable thing is LSU was just getting obliterated by Alabama the entire night, pretty much from the get-go. But LSU was holding them to field goals, or Alabama couldn't get touchdowns, however you want to look at it. And the game kept remaining close until finally they just broke it open. But was this one of the worst championship games you've ever seen?
I think it would be the worst, performances by a team. I don't know about that. I think what Alabama did today was absolutely dynamic, the way they played defense. I think it was probably the best defensive performance I've ever seen in a bowl game. Bowl, professional, whatever. This was a great defensive showing. Nick Saban had them prepared to play defense. He trusted his defense. He really obviously didn't look like he prepared his offense all that well. But the defense came ready to play, and he leaned on the defense, and they came up, with the positives as opposed to the negatives. No penalties.
Until the last few minutes of the game. Yeah,
right.
Absolutely
but no
unbelievable.
Penalties in valuable time. Can you believe that? I've never seen anything like that.
I got to ask you, this just boggled my mind, and I was on Twitter all night tweeting with people, and everyone asking the same question. Where the heck was Jarrett Lee? Why was he not in the game? You have Jordan Jefferson, who just couldn't get out of his own way for most of the game. Finally, he started to get a little momentum once the game was out of reach. Why was Les Miles reluctant to give him any kind of chance? This was the same guy that helped them beat Oregon early in the season. Did I miss something here?
I mean, that's what I was trying to figure out. I was yelling. I was in the newsroom and I was yelling. I don't know why they wouldn't put him in. It didn't really make any sense. But I guess they didn't want to ruin. They didn't want to take away the run. I mean, even though the run really wasn't working. I mean, I've never seen a quarterback be so horrible at the option in college than Jefferson today. He was throwing it literally when the guy was going out of bounds. Every single time. There was no way for the guy to get an edge.
It's just one of those games that all the analysts kept saying, bring on the rematch. Bring on the rematch. It's going to be different this time. There's going to be points. There's going to be touchdowns. They have 37 days to prepare, 44 days to prepare. We're going to get a completely different game, and for the first 2.5 quarters, it looked no different, with the exception of the points on the scoreboard. The style of play was practically the same. I know the SEC wins another national championship, and they already had a commercial during the game, spouting about how great the conference in football that they are. But there are going to be a lot of people who, A, already now hate the SEC even more after this game, and B, does this actually make the SEC look bad in terms of their style?
I mean, I don't think so. I think that they play real football. They play ground and pound. Defense wins championships, as the old adage is. And, I mean, defense definitely won this championship, for sure. It wasn't the offense. I guess you could say special teams, maybe. I mean, this game was so defense-oriented. This is a game that I like watching because I like to see dominant defenses, but if for fans who are used to watching the NFL the way it is now and college football the way it is now, it doesn't seem like it's an easy game to sell, the SEC,
I want to throw a number. I want to throw some numbers at you. I got to throw some numbers at you that are just, I've never seen anything like this. LSU on the night averaged 1.4 yards per pass, 2.6 yards average per rush. They had 92 total yards for the game. They had an average gain of 1.7 yards. I mean, have you ever seen this type of ineptitude? I don't care how good Alabama's defense is. You can't tell me that Brent Musburger, halfway through the fourth quarter or whatever it was cheering that LSU got off the 50-yard line. How embarrassing was this for LSU?
I mean, it was a real letdown. I think it proved that having all that extra time in between the national championship game and the SEC championship is kind of a waste. I mean, it doesn't do any. There's no benefit for the teams going in. I mean, it probably threw them off their rhythm. Alabama in the last game looked like they actually had LSU's number, and then if they didn't miss a couple of field goals, the game would have gone to Alabama anyway. So, while I do think that LSU is a great team, or a great defense, I think when their defense isn't stepping up, the offense lost hope, and it just didn't seem like they had a backup plan. They definitely game planned for this game. You could tell what they were trying to do. They were trying to use the option a lot. They were trying to use, slants and short routes, and when that didn't work, the whole offense fell apart.
LSU went from, some people were arguing before the day, including myself, because of their schedule strength. They beat West Virginia, who won the Orange Bowl, Oregon, who won the Rose Bowl, Arkansas, that won the Cotton Bowl, a host of other quality teams, including Alabama, obviously, before tonight. They beat all these incredible teams, and then this happens. When you look back at this team 5 years from now, do you look at them and go, that was an unbelievable team that just had an unexplainable final game? Or are they possibly just not who we thought they were?
I think it's a mixture of both. I think they didn't come ready to play. I mean, essentially what was a home game for them. And I think that Alabama outcoached them. I think Les Miles was outcoached by Nick Saban. I mean, it was a game of coaching. When it comes down to defense, it's normally a game of coaching. And Nick Saban whooped him. I mean, Nick Saban was ridiculous. He was basically running up the score in reverse by, stopping Les Miles. I mean, he really, they rubbed it in how great of a defense they were. And I think that it made LSU look pathetic. I mean, if I was an LSU, fan, I would be scared to show up to work or class tomorrow, after I was bragging that I was in the national championship game.
Yeah, it was pretty bad. And as I said, the announcers were trying so hard to make this game interesting. I mean, we went from, and granted, it wasn't the greatest game ever by any stretch last year, but we went from Oregon and Auburn, different, South versus West, Cam Newton versus the high-flying Ducks. We went from a really appealing matchup to a game that people were reluctant to replay in the first place, and it not only didn't live up to the hype, it didn't really live up to anything. I mean, Alabama wins, and this championship feels a lot more validated than the one when they beat Texas and Colt McCoy got hurt. But
I mean, yeah. I mean, it does. I mean, it's really interesting because, the state of Alabama's had the last 3 national championship games, and Alabama, they've won 2 of the 3, and they're just dominating. That state is just unbelievable for football talent. They're going to have 3 to 4 first-round picks. 3 of those players could go. I mean, you got Drake Kirkpatrick, who's the best tackling cornerback in the league. He's 6'3". He's fast. He's the second best corner in the draft next to Maurice Claiborne, who disappeared in this entire game. I didn't see him once.
Right.
You've got Upshaw, who I believe won defensive MVP. He's a monster. Unfortunately, the need for 3-4 linebackers is kind of small in the first round, so he'll either go to the Bills, the Jets, or he might fall to the second round. And then you got Trent Richardson.
Let me ask you this before you get to Richardson, who had a pretty shaky start, and everybody was asking, where is Trent Richardson? Who hurt their stock most in this game?
As far as draft picks?
Yeah.
As far as draft picks, I'd say Claiborne and maybe Matthew for next year. I mean, Honey Badger looked like a poodle. He didn't look like a honey badger at all. I mean, he got whooped. I mean, he was owned all night, and his return. I mean, they didn't kick to him, so his return skills didn't get shown off. I think people are going to wonder what happened to Claiborne, and it's not like he disappeared because he was shutting down other people. He just really didn't make any plays. I think, if you talk about prospects that helped themselves, Drake Kirkpatrick, Upshaw, Dante Hightower, all 3 of them showed up and played extremely well. I think Trent Richardson, I was saying that I would drop him maybe 5 picks, or I would trade down for him because I had him in my latest mock draft at 5 going to Tampa. I'd probably trade down if I was Tampa Bay at 10 or 11 to pick him up because I don't think this performance speaks well for him, being that it was such a big atmosphere and it was such an important game. That's normally when you're supposed to shine. Like Mark Ingram shined when he, was met with, adversity. Granted, he fell because they didn't make the national championship a second time in a row. But, I mean, I think Claiborne and Richardson kind of hurt their stock a little bit.
Last question, and this is almost fitting. The championship hats read done with a very creative 1 inside there. Worst championship hats you've ever seen?
I mean, I'm no critique of style, but yeah, I mean, not really the most fashionable accessory.
It just keeps getting worse.
Yeah, I mean, in the grand scheme of things, the hat represented kind of the game. They probably should have given the hats to LSU.
The hats said dud.
Yeah.
But, hey, you know what? The game is over. The sad thing is college football's over. I think a lot of fans have a very sour taste in their mouth, and I think, once again, people go, or is this going to lead us any closer to at least a +1? If I'm ESPN, I own the BCS right. I don't get why anyone wouldn't want this. It doesn't make any sense in the world to me We will find out what the Big Ten commissioners and some of these other people are thinking. Maybe they'll finally let their guard down a little bit. After all, the BCS Championship game wasn't one of the conventional bowl games. If you spin the Rose Bowl in another game, and then you have a playoff or a one-game playoff, what's the harm in that? We will find out. He's Mike Kay. I'm Scott Jacobs. You just watched the worst BCS Championship game in the history of college football. This is Juice.
Let's move on
Radio.
to the draft.
Now we're talking.